isn't it? This is all totally real. And you should be very angry.
Looters have taken control of the yogurt aisle. Democracy hangs in the balance.
Rioters are, like, totally making us sad.
In a shocking twist, I'm moisturizing under duress. This is actually amazing.
Good evening, my dear friends. Welcome to another episode of the Pat and Jeff Show. I'm your host, Pat, joined by my co-host, Jeff. Jeff, how's life out in the beautiful part of the world?
Hey, it's all good here, Patrick. We're all doing well. So
I woke up this morning. I'm in Houston, Texas. It's 66 degrees outside. I can't believe it. It was beautiful. We took a walk and everything. The baby was happy to have a little bit of non-heat, and we're just having a blast down here in Houston because it's only going to get nicer and nicer as the season progresses. Today we're talking about L. Ron Hubbard. Jeff, this was your idea. What made you think about L. Ron Hubbard in the first place?
Well, I was thinking about a bunch of these figures that have been in our past history, similarly what last time with Howard Hughes. I mean, there's others as well, but L. Ron Hubbard is quite a controversial figure. And I figured the consistency of how they demonize this guy, again, we always go back to this history. If it was the history controlled by the cabal, let's say, or the black hats, or whatever you want to call them, if it was their story, then I'm thinking it's pretty much the opposite. So let's find out. Let's see what the story is.
No kidding. So let's just jump right into it. Everybody, do me a favor. Those of you joining us as raid recipients from the D-Class show for Saturday, hit the thumbs up button for me. Get us onto that leaderboard. I think we got into the teens last time, which is always nice, but the top 10, well, it just warms my heart like you wouldn't believe. So hit that thumbs up, share this show with your friends. Conspiracy theorists are mainstream these days, so don't forget that. Hit that thumbs up. Thank you for your attention to this matter. All right, Jeff, where do you want to go first?
Well, let's start with that first article that I sent you. It's basically the mainstream narrative that we know about L. Ron Hubbard. And I think we should start there. Maybe you can do a read, and I think that would be a great place to start.
Great idea. So that one is entitled The Untold Truth of L. Ron Hubbard at grunge.com.
Right. And I, honestly, the irony, the untold truth. Like, really? I mean, this is what everybody's been told.
Every schmuck. Yeah. Every schmuck with a television set. All right. Yeah. This is from grunge.com, September 2nd, 2021, by Nolan Moore. The Untold Truth of L. Ron Hubbard. In 1950, a bizarre self-help guide called Dianetics hit bookshelves across the United States. Over the next 7 decades, this oddball philosophy would morph into Scientology, the infamous cult of engrams, e-meters, and aliens. But while it's probably best known thanks to South Park and the ramblings of Tom Cruise, Scientology is no joke. The group earns around $200 million annually, allegedly imprisons wayward members, and will harass anyone deemed an enemy of the church. So this is called poisoning the well. By the way, I have no dog in this fight. I'm obviously not a Scientologist. Hang on a second. All right. Continuing. So, how did Scientology get started? Well, blame a red-headed sci-fi writer named Lafayette Ronald L. Ron Hubbard, known affectionately to his followers as LRH. Hubbard went from penning pulp fiction to running one of the biggest con jobs in American, nay, world history. The man allegedly once said, "If you want to make any money, the only way to do it is to make a religion so the government wouldn't take it all." And naturally, being such a larger-than-life figure, Hubbard's story is full of madness, misadventures, and untold truths. His childhood was full of lies. L. Ron Hubbard dreamed up a religion involving an evil galactic emperor and extraterrestrial ghosts. But Hubbard didn't just have a story about the creation of the world. Every other word that came out of his mouth was a half-truth or a hoax, especially when it came to his own life. In order to make himself seem like a modern-day messiah, Hubbard had to beef up his biography. According to Hubbard, he was the youngest Eagle Scout in history and spent a lot of his childhood working as a cowboy on his family's gigantic ranch in Montana. At age 4, he met a Blackfoot medicine man who made him a blood brother. Then Hubbard took a grand tour across Asia where he visited China and was made a Lama priest after a year as a neophyte. He claimed to have lived with Tibetan bandits, befriended Manchurian warlords, and even taught a South Pacific tribe not to worry about the monstrous rumblings coming in from inside a cave, as it was just an underground river. Needless to say, this is 99% nonsense. Yeah, Hubbard did visit China as a boy, but he hated the place. As for the Eagle Scout claim, he did, in fact, reach that rank, but there's no way to know if he was the youngest, as the Boy Scouts don't keep track of Eagle Scout ages. The Blackfoot claim is complete nonsense, as the Blackfeet don't have a blood brother ritual. The Hubbards didn't have a giant ranch. But the man's lies didn't stop with childhood. Hubbard would later say he was a nuclear physicist when in reality he couldn't even pass physics. As one judge put it in a 1985 case, L. Ron Hubbard was a pathological liar. This article hates this man's guts. He almost started a war with Mexico. From 1941 to 1950, L. Ron served as a lieutenant with the U.S. Navy. Of course, he was far from what you'd call an exemplary officer. For most of his military career, Hubbard was a desk jockey, and while that's totally cool, Hubbard later claimed he earned 21 medals, including the Purple Heart. In reality, Hubbard never saw action and only received 4 non-combat medals. He even spent 2 days chasing the Japanese off the Oregon coast. Commanding a sub-hunter, Hubbard was patrolling the Pacific when he encountered 2 enemy submarines. He began firing depth charges left and right, and soon there were 5 ships and 2 blimps hunting for the evasive enemy. However, after Hubbard wasted 2 days, his superiors realized there weren't any Japanese lurking in the water. Instead, Hubbard was battling a magnetic deposit. Shockingly, Hubbard would top his own stupidity in 1943 when he almost started a war with Mexico. He unwittingly took his ship into Mexican waters and began firing near the Coronado Islands. There were members of the Mexican Navy on the islands, and some shells were even reported to hit land. After the incident, the Mexican military said they would sink the next ship that sailed into their territory, and Hubbard was relieved of his command. Later on, Hubbard would tell multiple people he'd been wounded during the war. He told some people he'd been shot in the back, while others heard that a bomb had exploded in his face. Hubbard then claimed he'd healed his war wounds with the power of Scientology, but as the LA Times pointed out, the only thing Hubbard suffered during World War II was a nasty ulcer. You want to do this one, or do you want to skip it?
I think we'd skip it.
Jeff, you want to do this?
Oh, you can't hear me?
Do you want me to use this video?
No. But you
Okay.
can't hear me? Can you hear me? I don't know.
While he eventually created one of the world's largest cults, L. Ron Hubbard suffered from self-esteem issues, especially during the 1940s. Hoping to boost his confidence, Hubbard wrote the world's weirdest diary, known as his affirmations, aka admissions. These writings contain some pretty twisted platitudes, lines that Hubbard most likely recorded on tape and then listened to as part of a bizarre magical self-help ritual. Granted, it's not 100% confirmed that Hubbard wrote the affirmations. However, the church has done its best to keep the documents a secret, and the group has never denied the documents were real. In fact, an attorney working for Hubbard's wife basically admitted Hubbard was the mastermind behind these horribly awkward admissions. This is a remarkably nasty author. He writes about Hubbard the way that the New York Times writes about Trump.
Yep.
Not saying it's not true. I'm saying, damn, this guy hates L. Ron Hubbard. So, what exactly was Hubbard writing? Well, some of the stranger lines read, "I can have no doubts in my psychic powers," and "You can sing beautifully. Your voice can imitate any singer." He also tried to convince himself that men are your slaves, elemental spirits are your slaves. He even predicted he would live for centuries, telling himself he will live to be 200 years old. Not surprisingly, a lot of his affirmations revolved around sex, and this is where things get really cringeworthy. "You are as sensitive and sexy as Pan," Hubbard allegedly wrote before adding, "singing to women, for you sing like a master, destroys their will to resist." In another passage, Hubbard said, "Your sexual power is magnificent, and they know it. If they are afraid of it, that is their loss. You are not affected by it." But for all his faith in his manly abilities, Hubbard admitted multiple times that he suffered from incredibly low libido and that he wanted to use self-hypnotism to restore his potency. Yeah, it's embarrassing stuff, so it's easy to see why the church doesn't like affirming these humiliating affirmations.
Agreed. This is interesting.
He was a magician who tried to create the Antichrist. Jack Parsons, pictured here, was a key figure in the story of space travel. He invented solid rocket fuel and co-founded the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, one of the most important organizations in NASA history. But when Parsons wasn't tinkering with rockets, he was practicing sex magic and working his way higher and higher in the Ordo Templi Orientis, a society led by the infamous pagan Aleister Crowley.
You see, yeah.
Parsons used the cash he made from selling rockets to buy a mansion nicknamed the Parsonage. The place became a hangout for all sorts of weirdos, sci-fi writers, witches, nuclear scientists. And into this magical madness walked L. Ron Hubbard, ready to make something supernatural happen. Hubbard and Parsons hit it off immediately, and the two decided to do a heavy-duty ritual called the Babylon working. The plan was to summon the goddess Babylon, not Babylon as in the place, but Babylon, aka the Scarlet Woman, a powerful entity that would give birth to the Antichrist. This unusual experiment involved Hubbard chanting while Parsons had a good time going solo. The two also performed spells involving swords and animal blood until one day a woman named Marjorie Cameron arrived at the parsonage. Parsons was convinced this was the Scarlet Woman, so he began sleeping with her as Hubbard stood by, reciting magical phrases in hopes of impregnating Cameron with the fabled Moonchild. Of course, they never summoned the Antichrist. How do you know that? And this magical partnership majorly backfired when Parsons' girlfriend, Sarah Northrop, fell in love with Hubbard. Making matters worse, Hubbard suggested that Parsons give him $20,000 so he and Sarah could drive to Florida, buy a few boats, and then sail them back to Parsons' California home, and they could go into the ship-selling business together. Only instead of keeping his end of the deal, Hubbard took off with both Sarah and the cash, leaving poor Parsons with nothing but spells and regrets.
Yeah, this is.
He thought he could communicate with plants. Christianity has the crucifix, Islam has prayer rugs, and Scientology has the E-meter, a device that's essentially a souped-up lie detector. So what's the point of this E-meter? Well, the whole goal of Scientology is to reach a level of enlightenment called clear. Once you're there, you'll supposedly become superhuman, free of physical and psychological illness. In order to reach clear, you have to go through a process called auditing, which forces you to confront negative memories, engrams, from your past. Plus, alien ghosts called thetans play into all this. It's complicated. During these auditing processes, the subject holds onto the E-meter while the auditor asks a series of strange questions. When the subject answers, a needle on the meter pings back and forth, caused by an electric current, and the auditor then determines whether or not the subject is free from the engrams and can progress to the next level of Scientology. Naturally, this all costs a lot of money. So, what does this have to do with talking to plants? Well, after starting the Church of Scientology, Hubbard made his way over to England, bought an estate in Sussex, and tried impressing local reporters by claiming he was a plant expert. In fact, when a photographer showed up, Hubbard tested his E-meter on a tomato. He hooked up the device to the little red fruit, watched the needle go back and forth, and then declared that tomatoes feel pain and scream when sliced. Naturally, the photo and his outrageous claims attracted quite a bit of publicity, making Hubbard a laughingstock in England until he was kicked out of the country in 1969. Next.
Patrick, can you hear me?
Find one of the largest ever infiltrations of the U.S. government. It's no secret that Scientology is an incredibly expensive cult, one that earns hundreds of millions each year. And one of the keys to making all that sweet moolah is the church's tax-exempt status. However, Scientology has had a pretty rocky relationship with the IRS over the years, especially when the feds revoked its tax status in 1967. The cult was left high and dry until 1993, when the feds reversed their decision. But during those financially weird years, Hubbard waged war against the government, hoping to get revenge on the IRS. And while that might sound like a foolhardy move, the man actually pulled off one of the largest ever infiltrations of the United States government. Hubbard launched his undercover campaign in 1973, dubbing it Operation Snow White. But while LRH, L. Ron Hubbard, was the man behind the plan, the actual plot was carried out by the Guardian's office, basically the CIA of Scientology. The group was run by Hubbard's wife, Mary Sue. And Snow White involved Scientologists getting jobs in government buildings and stealing documents related to the cult. Spies also bugged government buildings, and before the church was busted in 1977, there were around 5,000 agents stealing thousands of documents from right under Uncle Sam's nose. When Snow White was finally exposed, 11 high-ranking Scientologists, including Mary Sue, were tossed behind bars. As for Hubbard, he was listed as an unindicted co-conspirator and was never charged. In other words, you could say Hubbard was in the clear. He had an army of teenage girls. In 1967, L. Ron Hubbard bought a fleet of ships and created the Sea Org, a seafaring sect meant for die-hard Scientologists. Hubbard himself took up residence on the flagship Apollo, and after dubbing himself the Commodore, Hubbard and his followers set sail across the Atlantic. But life in the Sea Org was not a lot of fun. Hubbard actually created the organization because he was under criminal investigation in multiple countries, so he figured an extended ocean cruise was just the ticket. And if a Sea Org member committed the slightest infraction, they were severely punished. Some were imprisoned in lockers, while others were tossed overboard, and it wasn't like you could leave. Sea Org members signed a billion-year contract. Tossed overboard, huh? This is a very casual accusation of murder. But without a doubt, the weirdest part of Sea Org was the Commodore's messenger organization, perhaps the most powerful clique in Hubbard's seafaring operation. The messengers were Hubbard's personal assistants, following him everywhere, delivering orders to the rest of the ship. And while there were a few boys here and there, current Scientology president David Miscavige was a member, most of the messengers were girls, ranging in age from 11 to 16. According to ex-Scientologist Kate Bornstein, there was nothing explicit going on between Hubbard and the girls, but still, he made them do some icky stuff. Messengers were trained to do spot-on impressions of Hubbard when delivering his commands. They were also in charge of keeping the temperature in his room just right, following him around with ashtrays, and even dressing him. As the LA Times put it, Hubbard taught them how to sprinkle powder in his socks and gently slip them on so as not to pull the hairs on his legs. They combed his hair, gave him massages, and applied skin cream to his face for religion.
Hey, Patrick, can you hear me?
He's the most prolific author in history. Before starting his church in 1954, L. Ron Hubbard earned his living as a pulp fiction writer, churning out story after story across numerous genres. He sold his first story in February 1934, an adventure tale called The Green God that featured a heroic American killing a bunch of Chinese bad guys. Nobody ever accused Hubbard of being politically correct. He published a Western in 1937 called Buckskin Brigades, a book about a white adventurer adopted by the Blackfeet, and his first ever sci-fi story was The Dangerous Dimension, which followed a scientist who can't stop teleporting to whatever place he's thinking about. According to author Alec Navala Lee, Hubbard, quote, published over 4 million words of fiction in his lifetime. So it's not that surprising to learn Hubbard has accomplished some impressive achievements. According to Guinness World Records, Hubbard holds the records for both the most published work by one author, total of 1,084, and the most translated author, same book, 70 translations of The Way to Happiness. Hubbard also has multiple bestsellers to his name, although that comes with a bit of a caveat. As pointed out by the LA Times, Hubbard's book sales have been boosted by Scientologists who swarm stores, buy as many copies as possible, and even allegedly return the books to the church's publishing company so they can be sold again. The hustle is real. He thought he was a musical genius. Near the end of his life, L. Ron Hubbard fancied himself a musical savant, composing several albums that boggle the mind and burst the eardrums. His first album, Space Jazz, was released in 1982. It was meant to accompany his notorious book, Battlefield Earth, but even though it featured jazz legend Chick Corea, the result was a mess of a soundtrack complete with every sound effect imaginable, from laser blasts to horse noises. However, if you're a fan of the Fairlight CMI, then this is the album for you. Hubbard's next 3 albums were published posthumously. Mission Earth, inspired by Hubbard's book of the same name, was performed by Edgar Winter, who couldn't salvage Hubbard's stilted lyrics. The Road to Freedom was released in 1986, and it basically serves as a Scientology tract performed by musical missionaries John Travolta and Frank Stallone. Hubbard himself even makes a From the Grave cameo at the end, performing a song called L'Envoi, Thank You for Sharing, which is just as amazing as you might expect. The tetralogy was finally completed in 2001 with The Joy of Creating, an album featuring evangelistic numbers from Isaac Hayes and Doug E. Fresh. But even before Hubbard's final years, the man was desperately trying to churn out the hits. Back when he was still commandeering the Sea Org, Hubbard managed and composed for a Scientology jazz band called the Apollo Stars. The group performed aboard his boat, the Apollo, and in 1974 they dropped an album called Power of Source. That's actually pretty catchy compared to Hubbard's later work. Damn, he helped create Charles Manson. With his scraggly hair and swastika tattoo, Charles Manson is an icon of murder and mayhem. But while Manson probably would have formed his bloodthirsty family without the help of L. Ron Hubbard, the founder of Scientology did play a part in the tragic story of Sharon Tate's death. While serving time in prison, Manson came across Hubbard's self-help tome, Dianetics, and found several ideas to be quite intriguing. Reading Hubbard's book, Manson learned new ways to manipulate people. As author Jeff Gwynne explains, Manson realized he could attract troubled and self-loathing women by convincing them, quote, that they didn't have to be crippled by the past, that they were immortal spirits temporarily trapped in their bodies, that they were basically good and capable of achieving anything. And evidently these tricks worked pretty well. That doesn't sound like the world's most diabolical message, by the way. Manson also briefly converted to Scientology, not because he truly believed Hubbard's line, but because he knew it would help him get out of jail. Prison officials were pleased when inmates found religion, and with his new positive outlook on life, the prison brass were fooled into thinking Manson was becoming a better person. So when he was released in 1967, having gleaned techniques and ideas from writers like Hubbard, Robert Heinlein, and Dale Carnegie, Manson created his own freaky religion, which the New York Times called an idiosyncratic mix of Scientology, hippie anti-authoritarianism, Beatle lyrics, the Book of Revelation, and the writings of Hitler. Can
you hear me or no?
All right.
You can't hear me, can you?
Okay, so we have ourselves the mainstream narrative on L. Ron Hubbard. I know nothing about L. Ron Hubbard other than what I just read there. And all of that stuff sounds a lot like what I've heard in general. The South Park lampooning of Scientology was, one, quite funny. They did a really good job. And two, I'm sure also extremely mean-spirited, because those guys are freaking mean-spirited. The portrayal of Tom Cruise was hilarious. And I know for a fact now that that was unfair to do to Tom Cruise, who has turned out to be smarter than all of them put together. So I am very open to hearing alternative viewpoints on L. Ron Hubbard, especially after that article being this nasty writer just poisoning the well with his filthy little like snarky stabs, and what a scumbag. I can already tell that Nolan Moore is a scumbag. So I'm now officially primed to try to understand a different narrative about L. Ron Hubbard.
Yeah, so let's talk about this a little bit. So even in the narrative, there were some hints as to kind of stuff that just doesn't add up. So the guy was dumb, he was a liar, he failed at almost everything he did, yet he built this supposed
this empire. This freaking dude crushing it, just crushing it. He obviously, the man had a charisma of 18, to use Dungeons and Dragons terms. The guy obviously extremely brilliant. He was at least put in command militarily, and somehow, did I hear that right? He had 5,000 agents infiltrating the United States government.
Yeah, that was that Project Snow White, I think they called it.
Yeah, Snow White. Snow White is just a buzzword in the Q drops, right?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. That's the other tie. But even beyond that, let's just go inside sort of sequence. So first they don't talk about this Parsons guy, Jack Parsons, who was Jet Propulsion Labs founder in Southern California, right? Who knows about that? And then Aleister Crowley is then mentioned, that these three guys, Aleister Crowley, Jack Parsons, and L. Ron Hubbard were buds hanging around, smoking weed, and just making jet fuel. You know what I mean? Like, none of this makes
rocket fuel.
Rocket fuel. But
solid state. It's all bullshit. Those rockets were helium balloons. Everything about it was fake. And Jack Parsons is not a scientist. Jack Parsons was an occultist and a propagandist and a master of psychological manipulation.
Right, as was Aleister Crowley, right? So, and that
Aleister Crowley was a freaking sorcerer.
Exactly, and part of the cabal, right? And supposedly the Bush woman that married the senior Bush was her was her father, but he was
Wait, whoa.
right?
Okay.
All right, so step back.
Laura Bush is the
No.
daughter.
No.
Barbara Bush.
Yeah. And I don't know if that adds up.
I don't know if it adds up either, but
Yeah.
I've also heard that Barbara Bush was a man, and these people all marry men. And also, you've got Chuck Schumer's wife. That's a dude. That's Dustin Hoffman. And you've got whoever's currently playing Melinda French Gates. That's Kevin Kline. So, okay. I'm open to all that stuff. Absolutely.
Well, it's just weird that this article and the history places these three characters together. Okay, so let's move on. Actually, I should have done this in order, but in World War II, he was a military intelligence officer in the Navy, but they don't call that out. I mean, there was some other evidence, and that led me to believe that, hey, could there be a link somewhere here to early Q days maybe or something? Because we'll find out later, he also did an assignment in the military in Australia, which is where this Z Special Operations Unit was operating, doing clandestine operations and attacks to Japan. And there was all sorts of stuff going on. But the weird part is this. Go back to the fundamentals of Dianetics. And by the way, I am not a Scientologist. I don't know much about the religion. So like you, I'm kind of just looking at this from just a clean slate. I have no preconceived notions about any of this, except some of the crap we've heard on TV over the years.
Yeah.
But the weird thing is, the Dianetics in and of itself is basically a self-help book on learning how to build your own sovereignty. Now, this is interesting, because your own sovereignty can perhaps save you from the effects of MK Ultra, right? So a lot of us have heard the story that the Black Hats, the CIA managing, have pulled this operation over all of us. They've been doing this since television has been on. They've been doing, they have total control of all the newspapers up to TV, and then TV, radio all gets introduced, that they owned all these airways. And through all this time, they MK'd Ultra us, right? The name of it is MK Ultra. Nobody's disputing that program didn't exist. It's actually, you could search it in any of these search engines and find a lot of information about it. Nobody denies it. So with that said, there are people who believe that Dianetics or L. Ron Hubbard figured out a way to prevent people from being subjected to or be taken over by MK Ultra type brainwashing and brain manipulation. Now, if that's the case, now things are changing and you can understand why the narrative might be the way the narrative was. Now, this is my belief. My belief is that part of this, it resonates with me. How do you find proof in this? Really? I don't know how you find proof on some of this stuff, right? Right? But let's just say it does make sense. I mean, he might have been attempted to be recruited by Aleister Crowley at some point to join the dark side. Apparently, he pushed back. Now, here's the story that I've heard. I heard it from through truthers. I can't cite a book and tell you I've read it in a book. I don't know if that'd make anybody feel any better if it was. I don't know. It's not in a textbook, that's for sure. But that it was known that he developed these techniques to fight against mind control. And the bad guys came to him and wanted it, and he said no. Now, his son, Quentin, was supposedly suicided at around age 22. I don't know if the math adds up to all this. I'm not sure. But the belief is that L. Ron Hubbard pushed back and said, there's absolutely no way I'm giving you this technology. And it turned out they not only commandeered Scientology and controlled it and made all the money for themselves, and actually probably did trafficking of women and did all these things that article accused L. Ron Hubbard of doing. That probably did happen in this religion or this cult. But I don't think it was L. Ron Hubbard running it. I think it was the Black Hats running it, because they were very, very, what's the word, opportunistic. They wanted this for themselves, so they took it anyway, but they didn't get the ability to fight back against the mind control stuff. And I think that was L. Ron Hubbard. Push back. They killed his son. And the story is that they decapitated him.
Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is just, you've heard it through the grapevine. We don't actually have the claim, but I bet you those claims are somewhere, and I would love to learn more about it. But yeah.
You can find, there's some truthers who talk about it, whether or not, I don't know, they don't cite their sources, so I don't have a source to go back to, but I don't know. I don't
want to minimize L. Ron Hubbard at all. This man was a legend in his own day, and he's a legend now who has had his legacy completely besmirched. Whether it was deserved or not, I do not know. You associate somebody with Jack Parsons, and I'm not going to be favorably disposed towards that, because Jack Parsons was a con artist, as was and Aleister Crowley, wasn't, if I'm not mistaken, he was like a Satanist, wickedest man alive, practicer of witchcraft, self-proclaimed wickedest man alive. Do what thou wilt. That guy. These are not great guys. But then again, the guy who wrote the article pairing L. Ron Hubbard with those two dudes was doing everything in his power to make sure that we all hate L. Ron Hubbard.
Yeah, as did the rest of it. And it's not the only article. Anything, Wikipedia, any place you want to go where you can find easy information, the easiest places to find the information, it's all negative. There's nothing positive about this guy at all. Now, they mention Dianetics, but they never go into the context of Dianetics, right? Which was the original construct of Scientology. But I believe that the Black Hats or somebody else commandeered that cult, took control of it, and did all sorts of other things with it, where you see these, what's her name, Remy, all these other people that came out and saying that they were in the cult, they were trafficked, and all this craziness that was going on. They just got out at the last minute. And I don't know if those stories are real. We don't know if that's real either. But a lot of us believe that because we've heard it on ABC News, and 2020 would do films on it, segments on it. And now all of a sudden it becomes part of the narrative, which leads me to believe it's not real.
Oh my gosh. We got to get to all of this. It's amazing.
Yeah, I think we should move to the next. Let's talk about this Operation Snow White, because this is kind of very interesting. So
you want to start with the Wikipedia, or do you want to start with the conspiracy theory number 19?
Let's start with that conspiracy theory number 19.
You got it. All right. Don't forget, everybody, hit the like. Pretty please, with sugar on top. Okay. Wait a minute. Okay, so Bibliotecapliades. Okay, so that's just a really weird spelling. And here we go. This site can't be reached. What have I done? I don't know, dude.
Well, you know what? We can just go to the other one then.
Yeah. All right. We'll go to the Wikipedia first, and then we'll figure it out.
If we have to, we can go back.
Okay. Operation Snow White from the Wikipedia. It's a criminal conspiracy by the Church of Scientology during the 1970s to purge unfavorable records about Scientology and its founder, L. Ron Hubbard. This project included a series of infiltrations and thefts from 136 government agencies. What an absolute unit he must have been to be able to pull this off. Foreign embassies, consulates, as well as private organizations critical of Scientology carried out by the church members in more than 30 countries. It was one of the largest infiltrations of the United States government in history, with up to 5,000 covert agents. What is this? 3 can keep a secret if 2 of them are dead. Ben Franklin was full of crap a lot of times. This operation also exposed the Scientology plot Operation Freak Out, because Operation Snow White was the case that initiated the U.S. government's investigation of the church. Under this program, Scientology operatives committed infiltration, wiretapping, theft of documents in government offices, most notably those of the IRS. 11 highly placed church executives, including Mary Sue Hubbard, third wife of founder L. Ron Hubbard and second in command of the organization, pleaded guilty and were convicted in federal court of obstructing justice, burglary of government offices, and theft of documents and government property. The case was United States versus Mary Sue Hubbard et al. Dude, this is a
Do you
freaking
believe
movie.
this?
Yeah.
It's insane. But there's something else, though. They cited Operation Freakout. Where did we just recently hear about freakouts and freak-offs and freak whatevers?
Oh, Operation P. Diddy.
I don't know. But this Operation Freakout, anyway, they were freak-offs, maybe. I can't remember what they called them.
In P. Diddy, they were called freak-offs, and it was just
Yeah.
an orgy. See who could be freakier.
Yeah, but this even this Operation Freakout thing was about somehow where this church was trying to get this one lady who was a psychiatric hospital. They wanted to get her committed to a hospital or something. There's such weird stories about this. But here's the other thing. Remember, they were saying the other article was making this church sound like it's this wacky cult and all this craziness is going on and that L. Ron Hubbard is a buffoon, he's a failure. Yet they infiltrated the U.S. government, the IRS, they infiltrated the CIA, a whole bunch of stuff. Now, here's my belief, okay? They're going to tie into some of these wacky stories because this is the only way I can do this to not prove it, but maybe let people think for themselves that maybe it's possible. Remember, Scientology, let's step back, Dianetics is the ability to create your own psychological sovereignty. It's basically, I think, what it's built on. So if that's the case, these 5,000 people were unable to be mind controlled. So, I mean, they're obviously pretty well trained. It doesn't surprise me they could infiltrate these federal agencies. It doesn't surprise me. But here's the weird part. This is not the first time this happened. And I think that's why they were so effective at it during this time frame, which was probably in the 70s. But here's another thought, that the Bay of Pigs invasion was it in 61? Maybe, 1960, 61, 62. Because the Bay of Pigs invasion was the precursor to the missile standoff, right?
Yeah,
so
the Cuban Missile Crisis.
The missile crisis followed the Bay of Pigs invasion. The Bay of Pigs invasion was the first thing. And what the Bay of Pigs invasion was, that they were supposedly sponsored by CIA, and President Kennedy at the time had to admit that he knew about it when he didn't know about it. And it was a failed attempt to overtake Castro in Cuba by 1,400, rebels that were fighting. And this Bay of Pigs thing failed. Okay, so Castro did everything he had to put him down really easy. And what was supposed to happen was Kennedy was supposed to then, to protect those rebels, send in the military. And this was supposed to initiate another world war, right? To get Russia to come in, because Russia was a sworn the protector of Cuba, right? So it was kind of like, well, this didn't work. Let's do the Cuban Missile Crisis. But anyway, here's the cool part about this. This is what's amazing. Some people believe that the Kennedy people, I believe the Q operation, sent in, they used this as a false flag, and sent in 1,600 of these, I don't know what you want to call them, kind of maybe double agents into these 17 agencies in the United States that were run by the black hats to infiltrate them. And see, it kind of makes sense because the people going in now were not subjected to all this mind control crap that they were doing everyone else in the CIA and everyone else in the DI, or whatever, all these defense agencies and military intelligence, not military intelligence, but intelligence agencies, FBI and whatever. So it doesn't surprise me that if they could do it in the 60s with 1,600 people, they could do it in the 70s with 5,000 people, because they built this team of people. I think this is could be the precursors to the 60,000 man army that we read about 2-3 weeks ago, right? I mean, where these people came in and they were obviously trained. I think it was a Q operation.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that they use a false flag. They use the tools of the Black Hats against them in this Bay of Pigs invasion. So that's one of the theories out there. And that's what caught my interest in trying
I
to
got to
dig
get my hands on. I want the whole narrative, man.
I know.
I got that Operation Snow White page to open. It is very, very long.
Yeah, we don't have to get into that at this point. I think we made the point that there was something. I mean, I just wanted to bring up the fact that there's evidence that this group of people were pretty effective at infiltrating the government. So there's a possibility it even happened prior in the 60s when these rumors happened about the Bay of Pigs. Don't know. But to me, it kind of resonates.
Okay, so Colonel Towner Watkins talks about Operation Gladio all the time, right? All right, well, Operation Gladio is a code name denoting the clandestine NATO stay-behind operation in Italy after World War II, intended to continue anti-communist resistance in the event of a Warsaw Pact invasion of Western Europe. Although Gladio specifically refers to the Italian branch of the NATO stay-behind organizations, Operation Gladio is used as an informal name for all stay-behind organizations. So the role of the CIA sponsoring Gladio in the extent of its activities during the Cold War era, basically CIA infiltration of everything. So I don't think Gladio is ever mentioned in the Q drops, but Snow White is. What if we just take a quick look at the Q drops that say Snow White?
Perfect.
I'm going to switch over to Brave. QAlerts.app. Sorry. 1 second. All right, there we are. So if I just type, those of you who don't know QAlerts.app, you need to go to QAlerts.app. And if you want to look up a specific drop, it's just number sign, and then that drop number. But you just type in Snow White or any other search term, and there you go. 31 posts found containing Snow White. Wow. That's a lot, guys. So if we go from the very beginning, so this is early to unreal. Look at this. All right, so drop 80. Maybe blow it up a little bit. You can see it, right?
Yeah, I can see them, but can't read them.
Too small.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe I can make it a little bigger. How's that?
Yeah, better.
So Q drop number 80 of November 5th, 2017. We need to get organized. Things need to be solved to understand what is about to happen. Let's start with Alice and Wonderland. Hillary Clinton in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. Saudi Arabia, The Bloody Wonderland. Snow White. Wizards and Warlocks. Q. Aleister Crowley, Warlock. Okay, so that's Q drop 80. Unreal. Look at this. November 5th. November 5th. November 5th. November 5th. Good God, this guy was going ape shit on November 5th. November 5th. November 5th. He said, okay, so just really put this in perspective. Q drops are coming out like a machine gun, and Q is going like a freaking autistic kid going, Snow White, Snow White, Snow White. Operation Snow White is a real thing, but apparently it was conducted by the Church of Scientology. Am I missing anything?
I don't think so. I mean, this link to Alice in Wonderland is obviously the big link. Follow the White Rabbit and all this kind of stuff that was in the Matrix, right? Uh-huh. There are a lot of links to this that they want to draw us in to see these posts. So you might be onto something. I didn't put that link together as far as in the actual Q drops, but there could be a link.
Now here's something else. Godfather 3 comes right with it, right? Over and over again. What if I instead just get all the posts that say Snow White and Godfather 3? Just Godfather. because there's another thing. It doesn't always say I. Sometimes it says LLL because a lowercase l looks like an I.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, thanks. All right. Just type Godfather. Godfather 3. Godfather 3. Godfather 3. How do I figure how to do Godfather 3 and Snow White? Anyway, this is super important in my opinion. So we'll leave it at that for a second because the real autists can really sink their teeth into it.
Let's put Matrix Codebreaker on this thing.
Right? No, put either Joe Rambo or Dave on it. I consider them to be of that caliber.
Yep, agreed. There could be a link. I love it.
All right, so I want to go to that 33 conspiracy theories. So as early as 1960, so, we got the gist. Sometime during the 1970s, the Church of Scientology decided that they'd had enough. Apparently, the Church of Scientology managed to perform the largest infiltration. We know that part. As early as 1960, L. Ron Hubbard had proposed that Scientologists should infiltrate government departments by taking secretarial, bodyguard, or other jobs. Oh, nice. I disapprove of that. Uncle Sam, please don't kill me. In the early 1970s, the Church of Scientology was increasingly scrutinized by U.S. federal agencies, having already been raided by the FDA in 1963. See, that makes me a little suspicious because the Food and Drug Administration can't raid shit. The Food and Drug Administration can have the FBI raid you, or anyway. The IRS claimed it owed millions of dollars in taxes, et cetera, et cetera. I think this is just a rehash.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know if there's anything real new that you'll see in that.
Okay. So where do you want to go from here?
Well, that's a good question. I think, why don't we look at this article from this blogger? The guy's name is Mark Rathbun. And I think I don't know if he's currently in the Church of Scientology, but maybe just read a little bit of this just to get the view from the other side of the coin, so to speak, right? Story.
The CIA versus L. Ron Hubbard. This is from Mark Rathbun. That's RATHBUN.blog. The CIA versus L. Ron Hubbard. Reference: The Deep State and Scientology, another blog entry by this same author. As covered in The Deep State and Scientology, the first prominent expert, in quotes, detractors of L. Ron Hubbard and Scientology in the early 1950s were leading members of the American Psychiatric Association, APA, and World Psychiatric Association, WPA. They also happened to be serving the CIA as MK Ultra shock drug hypnosis experimenters and operatives. They, in turn, through the original establishment evaluations of Hubbard, Dianetics, and Scientology, influenced media and government agencies to launch forever attacks on Hubbard and his research into the mind and spirit. Their motives were clear. Hubbard had exposed their secret programs. If you compare the fundamentals of what Hubbard was practicing with Dianetics, the precursor to Scientology, and what the MK Ultra shock docs were up to, there is no surprise why Hubbard became public enemy number one, and he and Scientology remained so for the rest of his life and beyond. Dianetics and Scientology were predicated on the idea that humans were adversely affected by their reactive minds. That portion of the mind that, unbeknownst to the individual, continued to record during moments of pain and unconsciousness or lowered consciousness, such as that induced by hypnosis, including such moments caused by or combined with drugs. During those incidents, the reactive mind records words around the person, takes them literally, and they later act as post-hypnotic suggestions below the level of the person's conscious awareness. This mechanism is the source of painful and illogical conduct by the individual. Dianetics reached those unconscious moments, brought them back to the conscious awareness of the individual, thus erasing their unknowing post-hypnotic influence. By doing so, the Scientologist restores and strengthens the individual's self-determinism, and he advances spiritually. MK Ultra's written objectives were precisely the opposite. In their own words, to obtain control of the future activities, physical and mental, of any individual, willing or unwilling, with a guarantee of amnesia. MK Ultra sought to implant post-hypnotic commands through hypnosis, drugs, and pain. The expressed idea was to strip the self-determinism of the individual and replace it with that of the CIA operator. A critical part of their goal was to create amnesia so that the directed crime committed by the programmed agent could never be traced back to the CIA. Clearly, no one could be more diametrically opposed to the CIA's MK Ultra in principle and in practice than Ron Hubbard. Nor could anyone pose more of a threat to that clandestine operation due to his unique discoveries providing ability to undo its effects. Naturally, when the victims of MK Ultra later happened upon Dianetics and Scientology, Hubbard's discoveries uncovered those intentionally implanted moments of pain and unconsciousness and released their power over the individuals affected, and worse, from the CIA's perspective, restored the memory of those individuals. When Hubbard published this fact in the 1951 book Science of Survival, the need arose to discredit Hubbard and Dianetics and later Scientology. Virtually every federal agency and every corporate media outlet were pressed into service to churn out perpetual anti-Hubbard and Scientology harassment and propaganda. It took extraordinary measures to maintain secrecy. In fact, it was not until the late 70s that anyone else outside of the CIA MK Ultra inner circle had any inkling of the atrocities. The most notoriously corrupt and criminal CIA heads, Allen Dulles, 1953 to 1961, effectively 1947 to the late 60s, and Richard Helms, 1963 to 1976, had even carefully kept every president from Truman through Ford in the dark about these affairs. Helms ordered the destruction of every single piece of paper connected with MK Ultra in 1973, just when congressional Watergate investigations threatened more probing into the CIA's workings. What are you talking about, dude? It was rather common then for the CIA to control the important news flows of the day. To illustrate just how cozy and influential the CIA was with media heads in America, consider CIA Director Allen Dulles' relationship with his personal friends Henry and Claire Booth Luce. Luce was the publisher of the world's most influential 1950s through 1990s publication, Time magazine. The CIA supplied both Luce's with LSD, which they regularly ingested. Good times. Realized the LSD was supplied while Dulles A, was directing them on a daily basis, and B, LSD was being used by Dulles' MK Ultra operation to eliminate the free will in unwitting dupes who then carried out the CIA's mind control ops. There is documented history of the Luces many times flanking CIA/State Department plots to topple governments and deceive the American people. See, e.g., The Devil's Chessboard, Allen Dulles, the CIA, and the Rise of America's Secret Government, David Talbot, Harper, 2015. Between 1950 and 1991, Time was the tip of the battering ram spear that instigated a host of major attacks upon Scientology. The assault instigated by the Luce Dulles CIA Global Security State Consortium culminated over 32 years of continuous propaganda hammering with a Time magazine cover in 1991, which proclaimed in bold scare headlines and grotesque cartoonish art, Scientology was the cult of power and greed. It was the epitome of the sociopathic attribute of accusing others of one's own sordid conduct and motives. More on this in upcoming installments. The interconnection between MK Ultra and anti-Scientology propagandists was so close that it seemed to be deemed an authoritative Hubbard/Scientology detractor required a several-year CIA MK Ultra torturer apprenticeship. So it was with the likes of Winfried Overholser, the original Hubbard Dianetics denouncer, and leading member of MK Ultra's predecessor operations Bluebird and Artichoke, president of the American Psychiatric Association. Another was Ewan Cameron, a most prolific and sadistic MK Ultra experimenter, as well as the APA and WPA head when they established their anti-Hubbard, anti-Scientology policies. In the late 60s, the man they passed the anti-Scientology torch to had outdone even their MK Ultra exploits. This MK Ultra anti-Scientology successor played a critical role in covering up the CIA's program when Congress looked into it in the 70s. He played central roles in two of the 20th century's most traumatic blows to the collective psyche of the American people, ultimately unwittingly and posthumously. He supplied evidence that throws into question the to-date successful CIA denials of involvement in every significant assassination and assassination attempt in America, from John F. Kennedy through Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, Robert F. Kennedy, Ronald Reagan, and even Donald Trump. Stay tuned. When was this written?
Well, this is recent. This is like,
sounds that way.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, August 8th, 2025. Very nice.
So I thought it would be good just to add that, some position from somebody on the inside of Scientology, perhaps, because we've not heard from them yet. So interesting.
Incredibly interesting. How on earth do we begin to untangle this? Because everything I'm seeing here indicates that L. Ron Hubbard has been systematically maligned by the security/intelligence state. And if they do everything in their power to destroy somebody, that means that somebody is not who the intelligence agencies said that they are. So do we even know that this guy was really canoodling with Jack Parsons? I don't know. Maybe he was. I know Jack Parsons is a flim-flam artist, but it doesn't mean that you have to reevaluate everything constantly. I don't know, man. It's nuts.
I think it's even more compelling that this Aleister Crowley thing and the relationship there, even besides Parsons. Parsons ended up dead at 33, and that story kind of ended. But the Crowley thing is really even more intriguing to me because I believe that's a deep state agent in that gentleman, or whatever. I'm going to call him a gentleman. But and there's something there in that connection. And I wonder if that was the time when they were trying to recruit him and he was pushing back on it, L. Ron Hubbard, that is, that he wasn't going to join the Black Hats. And also, again, it's interesting that the mainstream media explanation of the death of his 22-year-old son was suicide, right? Not according to what I've heard some of the other people talk about. And by the way, those are there's a truther by the name of, he calls himself Strack Warrior, and he's a ex-military lieutenant colonel. Has a lot of statements that he makes, a lot of interesting positions that he takes on things. A lot of it I agree with, but that was one of the places where I had heard this Bay of Pigs explanation that it wasn't what we thought it was, that it was actually a false flag for the good guys, or they used it to their advantage. And that's why Kennedy let it happen, because the media and everything else was focused on that mistake, that boondoggle problem, whatever you want to call it, and that they were able to infiltrate the rest of these agencies. So what it does lead me to, though, L. Ron Hubbard, and again, I'm just trying to build a story here. I don't know if you've kind of followed this, the Howard Hughes thing. These are people who've consistently been maligned, and these stories just don't ever really add up. And the more bizarre they are, the more it makes me believe that they're not true. So with all of that said, I'm dying to understand the history of Q. I'm telling you, Patrick. I mean, I know what Sapioplex and those guys say about, maybe it goes back to the Zoid theory of 6,000 years ago. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure it's that old, but I do believe it's as old as Lincoln. There's a reason why that Lincoln bloodline was important for us to understand it, that we presented a while back. So there's a bit of a buildup here that I'm trying to put together. Does the story make sense? I just don't know. So if we could get to the bottom of the link of the Snow White and the drops, is it linked to this operation?
Well,
perhaps?
think about it this way. Think about what Snow White, the Operation Snow White, is a very simple. We're going to infiltrate these agencies in ways that will take time and with large numbers of people. So it could just simply be Q saying, all of our agencies are completely infiltrated. We have to infiltrate them back. I don't know.
Yeah.
I need to know what Godfather 3 was. See, the Godfather 3 messes with me, man, because there's nobody who's got an explanation for why Q used an L instead of a 1, instead of an I in Godfather I. Now, it's not every time, but it's a bunch of the times. And that is not something you do carelessly by accident. That's on purpose. There's got to be a reason.
Hey, there's also something else I just thought of. Do you remember the Culper story back in Turn? And you guys were talking about this a week or so ago.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, they used, slaves, but, housekeepers. They used, that quote, the help were the people they turned to get the information they needed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm wondering, if you think about it, that's kind of what this Operation Snow White did. Remember, they said they came in as security or doormen or, secretaries, assistants that they could get. Those are hard jobs. Trust me, I get it. I'm not, defacing those jobs, but it's just interesting that it's a similar pattern of deception, which seems to work. So, history repeats itself, future proves past, all these kind of things. It just keeps coming around.
So true. And you want to do the Martin Brodell clip?
I don't know if we have to. It's up to you if you want to.
3 minutes and 40 seconds. I want to see it.
Okay, let's go for it, and then you can see if it's
take this for whatever value you say, and if you don't, then you don't. It happens.
Yeah.
All right, here we go.
And before we just start, I just want to preface this, that what happened was there's a gentleman who kind of participates in these videos or these podcasts, John Maddox, who I've met through, just trying to dig and learn more about some of these things that some of these podcasters speak about. And I asked him to ask this gentleman, Strack, this ex-military lieutenant colonel, what's the link between L. Ron Hubbard and the Bay of Pigs? So that's kind of what comes out on this podcast that was about a week ago. I think it was last Saturday.
Okay. So extremely recent.
Yes.
3 minutes and 40 seconds.
And this is a photo of Strack when he was in the military. He's a middle-aged gentleman now. Don't know how old, but.
Gotcha.
Our phases. We're going to go bring this to, again, the crescendo, but it's going to allow people to expose this deep state for who they are. Remember, they're going to promote, just like you said, John, just like you said, Martin, they're going to promote, again, race and a race war. They're going to promote civil disobedience. They're going to promote, again, a civil war, and they want us to manifest, again, nuclear Armageddon. Their plan was, again, to create a race war that led to, again, civil disobedience, that would lead to, again, a civil war, would lead to us, again, manifesting, because we manifest everything we observe because we're creators, again, to a nuclear Armageddon or nuclear war.
All right, and I do want to mention something real quick here. So I mentioned to you before about this guy named Jeff Saltzer. I think I'm pronouncing it right. Jeff, if I'm not, forgive me. He watches your stuff. He watches our stuff. And he was asking a question about, did L. Ron Hubbard, was he involved with JFK in the Bay of Pigs, and was it a false flag or not? That's his question.
So L. Ron Hubbard was a commander in the United States Navy. Great question. So L. Ron Hubbard was a commander in the United States Navy. Yes, he knew President Kennedy, John Fitzgerald, Clooney Kennedy was part of the SGO bloodline. L. Ron Hubbard, he created this thing called Dianetics. Remember, he was a commander in the United States, again, Navy. The CIA, which, again, JFK said he was going to splinter into 1,000 pieces, they knew that, again, Dianetics was good for the people. And what Dianetics did, it didn't allow, again, them to use, again, their MK Ultra programming. So Dianetics, and please go read that. Please go read that. Dianetics from L. Ron Hubbard. It eliminated, again, the CIA's ability to use MK Ultra programming. They needed that, and they tried to, again, convince L. Ron Hubbard to come to the CIA. He said, hell no. I'm in the United States Navy. I know JFK. You people are evil. Anyway, they kidnapped his son named Quentin Q. And remember, they, again, tried to set a trap for L. Ron Hubbard. But the CIA, what happened is L. Ron Hubbard, of course, he was probably alerted by the White Hats because he was the White Hats. They tried to set a trap to try to capture him. But what he did is he exposed that trap. The CIA was so mad that they cut off his child's head, Quentin, and left him, decapitated, cut off his head outside of Las Vegas. You think L. Ron Hubbard's a little pissed off when they again decapitated his son? You damn right he is. And remember, he has the ability through, again, Dianetics to eliminate, again, MK Ultra programming. Well, what did they do, Strack? They just took 1,600, was 1 + 6, again, is 7, is divine. They took 1,600 Scientologists, we just call them patriots, and they inserted them into our government. Yeah, and they can't be MK Ultra programmed. And what they just do, they just took that whole cabal hierarchy and they flipped it on their fucking head. It's called infiltration over evasion. So 1,600, again, Scientologists, but just that's just a propaganda word that the deep state used. Because just like they call people conspiracy theorists, the same thing with, again, Scientologists. They were trying to, again, discredit the people that were actually learning the truth. So they weren't able to be MK Ultra programmed. Now think how powerful this weapon is, John and Martin. If you take 1,600, again, patriots, and insert them into government where they cannot be MK Ultra programming and infiltration over invasion, they were able to go in there and they were able to infiltrate it.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's just people need to understand. The military just flipped everything on them.
You can probably cut it there, yeah. So he's quite a character, Strack Warrior is what he calls. His name is Purvis. He was a lieutenant colonel. And the reason he didn't get promoted to full bird colonel was because he pushed back on the jab. He wouldn't let his people be forced into having any kind of, any kind of vaccine they didn't want. So quite an interesting character, but he has a lot of knowledge and does a lot of research. And he has his own website too, with his own channel on Rumble. Quite a character.
I gotta check that out.
Yeah.
Jeff, I'm going to be shipping you a bottle of Castor Blend, if I haven't already, because it is the most popular product that tulipblooms.shop has ever created. And it's because it's got all the power of castor oil, but it feels silky and gorgeous because of all the super duper premium oils. It's 40% castor oil, and it's the most versatile product you could possibly imagine. It goes on hair, goes on skin, goes on nails. It goes on internal organs if you put it in a castor oil pack. It's an amazing product. Right now we're doing it buy one, get one half off for an extra 24 hours. So check that out at tulipblooms.shop. Promo code Shapiro for 10% off. Jeff, as always, a great pleasure. And can't wait to do our next show. It's going to be fun. Jeff, is there anything you'd like to say to the audience before we sign off?
No, it's just pattern recognition, right? That's what we are. Pattern recognition specialists, conspiracy theorists. And look, think for yourselves and keep digging. That's what we do.
That is so true. Thanks, everybody, for watching. One more time, hit that thumbs up, share with your friends and family, and away we go. Bye, guys.